Thanks, Emily. So the coherence of that strategy still not entirely clear after yesterday. Members of the senior Labour Party across the country came together here in Brighton on the south coast of the UK and decided to put forward two quite contradictory ideas that will be voted on today. One is that they will push for a referendum, but without backing either the idea of remaining inside the EU or leaving under the kind of deal that they hope to get. The other is to remain entirely neutral while still pushing for that second referendum on EU membership. For this to happen, of course, they would need a general election and for themselves to move into power. And the timing of that election, of course, is entirely crucial, given that if there is to be a Brexit deadline of October 31st, it's not going to happen before then. If they're to see a 3-month extension, that would take you until the end of January. So I had a chance to catch up with one of the senior members of the Labour Party, Bill ESTERSON. He's in charge of their industrial strategy, energy, business and industrial trade. And I asked him, when would the Labour Party like to see a new general election happen?
So, lots of if, buts and maybes. I think at that point the discussions will be had in Parliament about whether that is the right time for the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, to call a vote of no confidence and to have that general election. But the earliest an election could now be would be the end of November or even the beginning of December. And the weather in this country is not great at the best of times at that time of year. The light is particularly poor at the end of November and the beginning of December, so it's not an attractive proposition. But my sense is the most likely time for that election is at that time.
So are there conversations going on inside the shadow cabinet, inside the top echelons of the Labour Party, that having a spring election is the best possible outcome at the moment?
I think we are undoubtedly considering the two options of whether it's in the winter or in the spring. And from the practical point of view of campaigning and holding an election and making sure people can go and vote, a spring election would be better. But I'm not so sure the public would put up with a further delay, given the deadlock that we have in Parliament, that of course has led us to the point where there hasn't been a resolution to what form of Brexit might happen or happen at all.
But not just the British public, presumably also members of the EU Council who, under the Bennett legislation, are being offered a late January extension, but under a spring election, it sounds like you would like to see that extension even further.
Well, I think let's just repeat. I think November or December is more likely, but you would need a longer extension. That is clear.
So let's just go back to basics here. Right now, the British Parliament suspended. What they're looking to do, the Labour Party, is once they're allowed back into Parliament, is to call a general election by essentially voting against Boris Johnson's government. That's quite a long lead time from that moment, though, up to 8 weeks until the election could be called. Given that the Parliament doesn't, in theory, end its suspension until mid-October, you're suddenly looking at very close to Christmas. And as he mentioned there, not a time they like to go to the polls. The problem is the European Council, that's the other 27 heads of state, they aren't necessarily going to grant this extension to late January, let alone beyond that. And from a business perspective, none of this provides any of the clarity that business leaders have said they'd like to see, Emily.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.